right, it's 11:15. Good morning and welcome to Donations and Gifts. When and how to accept things on behalf of the district. My name is Maurice Echols. I'm attorney advisor for the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability. Now let Ms. Abruzzo introduce herself.
My name is Katerina Abruzzo. I'm the donations manager at Serve DC. And so we work on donations agreements and generally the process with which you can accept donations to the district.
Maurice?
Yeah.
Both of those were one we can use.
Okay. Well, yeah, what we're going to talk about today is ethics, sports and public service, donations background, gifts, conflict of interest, Serve DC's role in ethical donations, sort of a process overview of how you can donate to the district, common pitfalls and real world scenarios we've got. This is something that we do investigate from time to time, and a real issue that we should be aware of and order to address. Anybody here ever been accused of accepting a bribe? This is basically what this training is to protect against. Issues like that where you can do your work, focus on doing your work, and stay protected. And my experience as well. A lot of organizations work alongside the district. They often give to the district with kindness in heart, not anything nefarious, but sometimes when they're competing for contracts, competing for grants, they're wondering why they didn't get the contract or grants, and so they're looking at the way things operate. And if someone sees you receiving a gift or believes that the relationship is too close, they'll make a complaint. And with that being said, you want to be protected in case some of those issues arise where you're accused of accepting the gift improperly. So with that being said, you'll protect yourself and your agency, and then we'll also have some time for some questions. All right, so ethics matter. Public trust relies on transparency. Even well within can violate the donation process protects the plan. It's a common theme here. Fairness and transparency. We want to make sure that people don't have an unfair advantage within the government, but then we also want to be transparent with the gifts that we do accept or receive. You want to keep records of that and be transparent. We had a question in the back.
I think she.
Okay. Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Now that's much better. All right. So public trust relies on fairness and transparency. Ethics rules ensure that no one receives special treatment or influence.
Now I have some background on the donations process. Congress has authorized the district to augment its budget via the acceptance of donations. However, there's this process that all of these donations have to go through. There are certain agencies that have some exemptions and a slightly different process. But if you're unsure, reach out to us. Generally, your agency will know if they have exemptions. This applies to any kind of donations to an individual, an organization, a business, donation. But someone cannot be or agency.
So I think people are having problems hearing you because the sound is cutting in and out.
Is this better? Oh, yeah, I can hear that.
Just to recap there are some exemptions to this process where these agencies and parts of DC government have slightly different processes. You'll generally be aware of that if you are one of those agencies, but it's best practice if you're unsure to come to us and seek advice from us. Donations can come from anyone. There's no kind of organization that's exempt from this process. It could be an individual, it could be a foundation. They're all under this, and cash donations are prohibited. So there are situations in which we can accept a financial donation. So that could be a wire transfer, a check, but no one should be dropping off cash at your agency. And then we'll talk a little bit more about it. QuickBase is our system with which we manage donations, and that you'll be seeking approval in, processing, and being able to maintain records of donations in. As far as gift rules, what's prohibited, there are some donations that are just not going to be accepted. And it's kind of this line of what's a donation and what's a gift. Generally, we can't be accepting donations from lobbyists, vendors, contractors, or anyone doing business with the district. And we have an example of a vendor sends Wizards tickets to an agency employee after winning a contract. This is not a donation that we could accept.
So there's a general prohibition on accepting gifts. We have, rules where we can accept them under certain circumstances or within certain values, but prohibitively, generally gifts are prohibited. Now, gifts include anything of value, meals, tickets, discounts, etc. It applies to in-kind reimbursements or advance payments. I'll say in-kind where, maybe they're not giving cash or a gift card or something like that, but if they're given, some type of service or favor in return, that's considered a gift as well, like especially if you can put, a value on it. I usually give the example of your neighbor, thanking you for your DC work or handling their application or something like that, and they notice potholes in your driveway, so they fill that pothole for you. You would have to decline, that gift. Maybe if they did it without you knowing, maybe dig up those potholes, or pay them for it. So there's a general prohibition on accepting gifts. And the issue is salary supplementation. You can't be tipped or paid for doing your government work. All right. So there's a prohibition on soliciting and accepting gifts from prohibited sources. Anyone knows what solicitation is? If you can give a definition. Anybody? What does it mean to solicit?
What's the question?
What does it mean to solicit? Solicit a gift, solicit a donation, to ask? Yeah, basically it's the ask. So there's a prohibition on asking. Now, I've reviewed the code a few times, and we had it listed before in an earlier slide where there's some certain agencies that are able to accept gifts directly. Of course, the mayor is able to accept the gifts, but you would think that if you're able to accept the gift, that you would be able to ask for the gift, but that's not the case. There's a prohibition on solicitation, but there is a process for getting permission to ask, right? In certain situations.
In general, if you're interested in soliciting a donation, and to be clear, this is something that would be very much for a purpose that your agency is authorized. So this is not about, I'm going to go ask for free tickets for a thing because this would be fun for staff. This is, wow, here's a need for this agency. This could be something for a school, or this could be, a lot of times it's in-kind type donations, but there are circumstances in which it's acceptable. But before you make those asks, you should be talking to our office to talk through what those circumstances may be, what are the rules about asking, the way in which you make that ask is going to be very particular. But in general, we do not recommend making any kind of solicitations before talking to us.
And with that being said, we also have a list here of prohibited sources. It could be supplemented for basically everyone. Everyone could be pretty much considered a prohibited source, especially if they're meeting you because of your DC government work. And I believe it was Asia who had a good insight where someone doesn't know you from a can of paint, right? They don't know you at all, but they know you work for DC government. Then you could presume that they're talking to you because you work for DC government. And then while doing so, if you find that they are, actively doing business with your agency or seeking the contract with your agency or just doing business with DC government in general, seeking business with DC government, they are likely a prohibited source. So the list are lobbyists, vendors, contractors, grantees, of course, even though they're doing good work alongside of the agencies. Most of the time, they're still a prohibited source because they're seeking a benefit or an action from the agency, especially when they're applying for those grants. Developers, applicants, someone trying to sell the agency, a program or something like that. And then anybody who's regulated by the district. So if they are, being inspected, have, some type of compliance they need to keep up, those are going to be prohibited sources as well. All right. So what do you do if you're offered a gift that can be accepted or can't be accepted? All right. So if you receive a gift that cannot be accepted, inform the donor. You can return it or donate it to charity or reimburse it at market value. We've said this before, perishables can be shared with your office staff. And then the example that we often give is a bakery drops off cupcakes as thanks for a quick permit approval. In those situations, yes, you can accept the cupcakes. Of course, that value is well over $10. But you can accept those cupcakes, share it with the staff because, cupcakes will go bad. It's not likely that you can, get rid of them in time. So with that being said, you have to reach out to that donor and let them know that you can't accept that type of gift again. There's a one-time acceptance for those perishable gifts that exceed $10. All right, so free attendance at events. Employees may not accept free travel, meals, and lodging. But I often tell people to defer to Serve DC to talk about what that donation may be for, and there may be, a chance that it could be approved, that way. But as a bottom line, yes, we can accept occasionally invitations to widely attended gatherings. But if those widely attended gatherings calls for some travel and some lodging, we wouldn't be able to accept funds given for that directly. That has to go through Serve DC if it could be allowed in some capacity. An example of that is, an agency director attends a professional gala as an invited panelist, and then it's allowed if written approval is obtained. And so with that being said, you have to get permission from your supervisor. If you're an agency head, it's the mayor or someone delegated in that capacity. You keep those records for 2 years, and then you can attend that event. Yeah, that's okay. And this was discussed in the training before. So there's a widely attended gathering that is expected to be 50 or more. If you're invited by a sponsor or a non-sponsor, I should say, someone else who's also attending the event and has to pay a ticket, and then the value of that ticket has to be less than $350. If you're invited by the host, the person that's throwing the event, then there is no limit on the ticket amount. But as I said before, the attendance is okay to accept directly, but any other associated expenses would have to be donated properly. Sure.
What if the gathering or the conference, I'm assuming it's some kind of conference or is a government, another government, not DC government, or just another government, whether federal or local or just another state? Does that impact it anyway?
Yeah, so you're fine to go there. So it's a government agency that's having the conference and inviting other government agencies. That's fine. The conflict comes or the issue comes in this is when the gifts are coming from the private part. I gotta get rid of some of these windows. Hold on. All right, so improperly accepting gifts. Donations can become a violation when staff accepts money, services, or items of value directly from outside groups and avoid the donations process. And we'll give some examples of how that happens. Donations are used to support office, agency, schools, and activity, but is not formally approved by Serve DC. The gift creates the appearance that an outside group can influence staff decisions or gain preferential treatment, and that's what we're trying to avoid. On the face, making it look like everybody has, or not making it look like, ensuring that everyone has a fair shot, and then also being transparent about the records that we keep and why we accepted this gift and what it was used for. Staff, you don't want to also be accused of using your government title or position to solicit funds or to, gather donations for your private organizations and things of that nature. And then with that being said, even well-intentioned efforts to support students, and I throw students in there because this is something that, we can see, occur within in schools. It's an environment or whatever that needs support, right? And we want to give that support, but we have to do it in a fashion that protects the government and the workers as well. I wish I could move this out the way. So common violations. We've investigated employees who have fundraised and donated to their own agencies and nonprofits that they organize themselves. Sometimes this happens via personal nonprofits. The issue comes into place if the person is, using the title because the public may not have donated to the 501c3 or supported the 501c3, but you being official within the DC government. So that creates an issue. Also, you have to pay attention to even if you have a 501c3 that's well intentioned to support the community in that nature, you have to reach out to us and ask for advice, outside activity advice concerning that 501c3. Because if you're, pushing or fundraising or operating that 501c3 while on duty for DC government, that becomes an issue. As well. And then also operating a 501c3 within the DC government building becomes an issue. You have to go through correct protocols for that private entity to have use of the DC government space. And then with that being said, when the private entity accepts donations that could be used for DC government, fundraising purposes, then those donations still have to go through Serve DC to be approved. And so the correct approach for those type of initiatives, all donations must go through official DC government donations approval processes to ensure transparency, accountability, and compliance with the ethics rules. Operations of 501c3s or other organizations wishing to operate within government buildings must go through proper procedures such as obtaining a building use agreement. And so before you solicit a donation, even in your personal capacity, in those donations you wish to give to DC government, talk to Serve DC and how to properly do it. cannot get that off my screen. All right, so a group of this is scenarios. So these are real life scenarios that are based off issues that we've seen, and so of course the identities of the people involved are protected in my trainings, but we just want to focus on the lesson at hand and figure out how to properly navigate that situation. And so you have a group of DCPS teachers who form a nonprofit to raise funds for student field trips and enrichment activities. Now, the proper process for that scenario, because that can raise, many different ethics issues. You got teachers forming a nonprofit, so we have to be aware of the outside activity rules. We have rules against fundraising, especially during government duty, so they have to pay attention to those rules. And then they're also fundraising for student activities, which is common, but those funds are being solicited by DC government in some capacity, and then also being given to DC government in some capacity. So we have to make sure that those roles are separated when that activity is happening, and then that also when those donations are properly accounted for and given. And so the nonprofit operates independently and is managed solely in teachers' private capacity outside of working hours. That's the first check that has to happen. All right, outside of of their district duty. All donations intended to support DCPS activities must be submitted through Serve DC for approval. The nonprofit coordinates with DCPS to ensure trips align with curriculum and safety policy. So if you're taking, DC government or DC students off time, make sure that coordination occurs. Now, with that being said, if there's a nonprofit in place and it's being operated by teachers, we also have to be aware of the representational rule. So those teachers that may be involved in a nonprofit wouldn't necessarily be able to speak to DCPS on behalf of the nonprofit. We have also seen this where parents are involved in those 501c3s as well. And 501c3, the parents can, coordinate that and do that in place of the staff that also supports the 501c3. And then if we do this properly, no donor receives preferential treatment or there's no perception of preferential treatment or influence over schools' decisions. All right. Here's another scenario. So a local author donates 100 copies of children's books to the DC Public Library. And then what's the proper process for that? Now, DCPL can accept donations under its internal gift acceptance procedures. They don't necessarily have to go through Serve DC to get those books. There are a few agencies, not many. There are a few agencies that can accept donations directly, but they can't just accept any donation. So if it's the public library, you can't accept the Tesla. It has to be something that's related to what you do and makes sense, right? And so the books are reviewed as aligned with the library's collection policies. They can accept that. They have to keep a record of the donation, and then if it's made, and it has to be made available for audit. That's widely attended gatherings, exception of donations and things of that nature. We have to keep records of those type of gifts. I know there's a bottom number for 2 years, but it may be longer in some other circumstances. Have you had any insight on that?
We also keep records.
Yeah. So I think the basis is 2 years, but now we have record capabilities where, we keep them for a long time. I think it's best practice to just hold on, to those records.
Maurice, you had a question in the chat, but it's about
Okay.
perishable item. I don't know if we answered it. It says who is supposed to keep track of the one-time perishable gift at the agency.
That might be hard to do, keeping track of the one-time perishable gifts. Now for the staff that's there, if it's a reasonable standard, right? So if the person gave a gift 10 years ago and you wouldn't remember that, but then someone else so happens to remember that, no, that was, they gave that same type of gift 10 years ago. We shouldn't have accepted that. Yes, that would be an issue. We would talk about that, but we would take that into consideration. But if you reasonable standard, like this person just gave the same gift last year or the month before or something like that, we should be able to keep track with that. Now I do understand that some of our offices are very large. We had one side discussion earlier today. I hope she doesn't mind me sharing, but people are coming. There's a service dog that also works at the agency, right? And so organizations come by who have worked with the agency before, who know the pup or see the pup or donating gifts to, the pup. And that's a big, agency. They don't really know where those, gifts are coming from. In that case, they just have to not accept any of them, right? You have to donate it, somewhere else.
And I would just say as well that you do have to notify the person that you can't accept the gift. So it might be a good practice maybe to do it by email and then just retain the email as some sort of shared space where anybody can like go and check for those kinds of things.
All right. So next scenario. Local business offers 50 Washington Nationals tickets to a DC agency to support a community engagement event. What's the proper process? Because we wouldn't be able to accept these national tickets right up front. I want to say the cheapest national ticket is maybe $40 online. No, $40 in person. Okay, I don't know what it is online. So basically, off the bat, you can't accept the national tickets, directly. From someone just walking up saying, "Hey, you work for this agency? Here's some national tickets. Y'all should come to the game." You can't do that. So submit those. I'll let you talk about it. If your agency is offered, national tickets, you have to decline it as far as the gift rules go. But sometimes they're able to be donated for some type of community purpose, and I'll let Katarina.
Yeah, so I think like the big thing to keep in mind here is this one, you never want it to be like this is being donated to an employee. Like that's not the type of thing that's going to be accepted. Is this being donated for something that you can reasonably explain and make sense as to why your agency would accept that? So there's going to be situations where some offices and agencies have work that, yeah, actually this does directly play into like their community engagement work. And then there's others where it's going to be like, this just seems like a gift you're trying to describe as a donation. In general, we work a lot with the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel, and they make a lot of these determinations. And they're going to ask follow-up questions where they exist. But it's generally going to be, does this kind of common sense make sense why your agency would have a reason to accept this?
All right. So the next scenario. A DC agency employee is invited to speak at a national urban planning conference. The organizer offers to cover travel and lodging. So a proper process. The agency may directly accept the invitation to attend the event. If it falls under those WAG exceptions and meets the agency guidelines and benefit from attending the event, they can attend the event. However, the travel and lodging expenses cannot be accepted under the gift rules. This is a question that we do get often, and I have to tell them no for the travel and lodging every time. But if the donor properly goes through Serve DC, they may be able to accept those travel donations. I can let you talk about that. Do you have insights?
Again, I think like a lot of this goes into, is this, are these donations meant to be for the agency? And is this a situation where it doesn't look like someone's just trying to give an employee a vacation? Like, so those are some of the considerations that come into this. Regardless of what the donation is, it's really got to go through the process. And different people ask different questions at different stages. But, are they reasonable amounts of costs? And we're going to just have questions about the nature of them, why they're being given, making sure it's not a like quid pro quo situation. Yeah, it's a variety of rules, and just the best practice is submit into QuickBase to get a determination from MULC.
All right, another scenario. Second. A landscaping company offers benches and native plants to beautify a DC park. Proper process. So the Department of Parks and Recreation submits a donation to serve DC for mayoral approval. Will it be the agency though, or the donor? Who can submit that? Okay. And then once approved, the donation is used strictly for park improvement. Agency maintains detailed records and ensures no promotional signage or special access is granted, to the donor. Because again, the issue is, quid pro quo situations. You don't want to promote, branding and things of that nature, because that could be, a reason on why they would donate the benches if the benches have, their company name, printed all over them or something like that. So again, the donation process supports the agency's missions, follows a formal approval and transparency requirement, but they still have to go through Serve DC.
One distinction that we also like to make that we often get a lot of questions about is what's the difference between a donation and a grant. And it's common that we get questions about this because grants are another way that you might be getting financial, like incoming, some sort of like incoming finances from an external organization. And so sometimes it's not super obvious, but in general, grants have a lot more specific objectives and outcomes. They have a competitive process usually. Proposals are submitted, and there's a lot of back and forth. Whereas a donation tends to have very few, if any, strings attached. There's not an expectation of work on our sides. Someone might say, I want this donation to be used by this agency, but a grant will be documented in a different way. Your agency will have potentially specific rules about grant making and grant acceptance, and there would be different kinds of agreements used to document those. So sometimes we have agencies reach out to us about guidance for grants, and that's not something that our office works on for other agencies. So going into what this process looks like, if you do have a donation that is for an authorized purpose, your first step will be to submit an application in QuickBase. The link will be distributed. It's in these slides. Basically, almost anyone who's a district employee can have access to QuickBase because you might be a person who's contacted for a donation. And in some cases, there are donations managers for agencies that receive many donations. You'll submit this application, which is going to ask you a lot of different questions about it, and then it'll go on to a legal review by the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel. And they're going to consider lots of things about this, what you submit. They might reach back out to you for follow-up questions. It depends on how complicated or straightforward this donation is. And they might even ask you also questions about, do we think this entity is suing the district for something right now? Is there anything that we know about that would make it look like that this could be a bribe or that this is being an attempt to influence a decision? And so will usually have a lot of questions. And after they conduct the review, if they determine that this donation is legally sufficient, it moves on to the step that's a bit more with Serve DC, where we work on getting a donation agreement signed. So there's a template that gets used, and ultimately, donations cannot be accepted until these donation agreements are fully signed by the donor, an authorized representative of your agency, and then the director of Serve DC. And then after you have this donation agreement, funds, if it's a financial donation, you would work with your counterparts at your agency, but that donation agreement for those funds to be deposited, the donation agreement often is used as backup documentation. For example, an agency that wants to accept laptops from a tech firm, before those laptops could be used, there needs to be a donation agreement in place. And I think we've already talked a little about this, but some of the benefits of the donation process are it protects us. If you're in a situation where there might be donations coming in, you want to make sure that these donations don't look like they're gifts to you. It avoids public scandals and mismanagement, especially with donations that might at first glance not seem like a logical thing for your agency to accept. That doesn't mean that they are not appropriate. And so by following this process, we can ensure that resources are managed appropriately. It can also ease donor concerns, and it allows agencies to highlight their work and like their efficient uses of resources. I see we have a question.
So how do you handle situations if realizes they received donation after, but they didn't go through the process? So they didn't get the donation agreement, they didn't do the application, but they've already accepted the donation they come to.
I think it's usually a time that we would talk to our Office of General Counsel on how to advise them. Our role is kind of more to work with people to follow the process.
Comment in here from the chat, talking about the donation. Note is that I think the donation may require the agency to use their funds to maintain the bench that we had talked about. That's a consideration. It may cost more money to maintain the donation.
Yes, so that is a question. So that is sometimes a question that MOLC will ask, and a lot of times, like one of their first questions is, "That's great that this agency wants to give you this ticket to attend this conference that very much meets the needs of your agency and really goes along with their work, but does this require us to spend money to use this? That is." And sometimes it is worth it, sometimes it is not, sometimes it's in the budget. And so that is a consideration that will also get asked. It's great to be given something that's a used item, but if that would require us to refurbish it, is that a good use of district resources? I see another question in the back.
If someone approaches Serve DC with what they believe is a donation, but Serve DC thinks is a gift or should be analyzed as a gift, do you all contact the agency ethics officers or have a process in place, or do you make the determination yourself on whether it can be accepted?
We'll usually tell those agencies or like the individuals that reach out to us to talk to who their respective person is at their agency. If we're not sure, sometimes we'll tell you to like go through the donations process and let the mayor's office of legal counsel make that like determination. But I would say that just because we say we don't think this is a donation does not mean you're like off the hook and you can just do whatever you want with what you're receiving. We're just trying to document and maintain records about what donations do come into the district. On to our next slide. So just kind of, I tend to think of our donations process in 3 main steps. Step 1 is this online application. So whoever at the agency, this could be a designated donations manager. This could be just someone at your agency, especially if you don't receive a lot of donations. You'll submit an application of this donation in QuickBase. Step 2 is the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel reviews your application for legal sufficiency. And then step 3 is the donation agreement. Your agency will fill out the agreement and it'll be signed, and then it will be signed by Serve DC. And so on the next slide, we've got a few more details. So common problems in the legal review are a conflict of interest, apparent advertising, so kind of concerns of would this appear like we're endorsing something, a lack of information, just do we have all the details? What's the value of this? And missing approval for travel donations. There's a lot of times additional approvals that need to take place for donations of travel. At the end of that review, the agency will receive an email confirming that the application has been approved or denied for legal sufficiency. And so that email is an important record. The next step is the agency will fill out and sign an agreement template that will also be signed by the donor. Serve DC reviews these for completion and signs the agreement. And I would say that this is a thing that ends up taking a bit more time than you would expect, because we really need these agreements to be standalone, complete agreements that explain what's going on. And so while the information in QuickBase is also there, we need these agreements to be able to stand alone. And so they have to be simultaneously consistent with what's in QuickBase, but also if information's in QuickBase, that alone is not enough. And so we like to remind people that these donation agreements are quite often subject to FOIA requests, and they come up in audits all the time. And so if you think a person could reasonably understand what's going on here with the details you've provided, that's usually a good litmus test for is this sufficient. Our next slide goes a little bit into considerations around foreign donations. There's additional approvals that are required. And so this means that the donation is coming from some sort of foreign source, which includes foreign governments, multinational organizations, foreign government members, or any agent or representative of foreign governmental organizations. So sometimes this can be like embassies in DC will try to donate to DC agencies. There's an additional approval that's required, and these go through the Office of General Counsel of the mayor, and they're going to have more questions. So an example is an embassy offers to fund an employee's trip abroad for a panel. This must first be cleared by the chief of staff to the mayor, and the Office of General Counsel is who handles and maintains the rest of these requests and sends it back and forth. On our next slide, how to submit. So requesting agency must send the international donation request to the Mayor's Office of General Counsel to get the required approval. These emails should be sent to Erica Satterley, the Deputy General Counsel, and they also can be sent to Lisa Brannock, the Executive Assistant at the Office of General Counsel. OGC will let you know if / when this donation is approved and at which point the donation can proceed with the Serve DC process. And in general, we recommend DC government employees review the mayor's memorandums, which have specific rules about international travel. To crowdfunding and solicitation. In general, solicitation means making the ask. And there's a lot of rules around solicitation, and we generally recommend that you come to us because solicitation can't really happen without a formal approval from us, and that will come in form of a legal sufficiency determination by MOLC, as well as our input. So an example we give is if someone at your agency were to create a GoFundMe for agency equipment, if there was no approval in place, it's going to violate a solicitation rule. And in general, online platforms are a murky area with solicitation that should have written approvals before anything happens.
Yes. What's a general turnaround? I know it's a case by case basis, but do you have a general turnaround time of when requests, and or do you give agencies, please ask us this number of weeks in advance, so we'll have to consider it?
So I can't make any promises about the turnaround time of the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel. In general, if you make a request and you don't hear from them within a week or so, I recommend reaching back out to them. Sometimes there are just a lot of donations that are happening in the district, and that can create a backlog. I would say in general, you should allow perhaps ideally a month, just to make sure that the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel might have a lot of questions for you that you might not know right off the bat. You might have to go back to the donor and talk to them and ask them questions about things they're doing. And then on our end, once we have legal sufficiency, we can work around the donation agreements, but I'd say it varies the turnaround times on those because sometimes information is just not there that we really need to be there.
I think a good point to reiterate is with the donations process is basically a case by case basis. Because there could be a donation that could otherwise meet the criteria to be accepted, but as they were saying earlier, if it would cost more to maintain the donation than it actually get from the benefit of receiving it, then that would be a reason why it wouldn't be accepted. So yeah, same scenario with DC Parks and Recs. If it was some playground equipment, but just you deem it too high risk or too costly to maintain, you would reject the playground equipment.
And one other thing to add is just to reiterate, this all applies to both in-kind and financial donations. And that can take a lot of forms. That can be just money. That could be just like small items that you could sometimes think of as a gift. That could be travel expenses. Lots of things fall under in kind. There are some examples like I love to give of like we once saw sand for a sandbox as a donation to the district. But we've also seen international flights be paid for as donations to the district. And so it's really anything and everything kind of go through this. And so that also adds to that, like, it depends quality of donations, is there's a lot of different questions and concerns that come up specific to the nature of those donors and what is being donated.
Of course, there are hard penalties for non-compliance with the gift rules, or if you receive a donation, it's basically going to be a violation of the gift rule if it's not donated properly. And of course, they lead to fines. Other mechanisms are public censure, reprimands, or even fines. Whoops. Well, there wasn't much to add at the end there, but my mouse pad decided to end the show. But with that being said, I believe we got a couple of seconds for questions. We're a little over an hour. Anybody want to ask anything?
Difference between donation and gifts, it could be interchangeable. That would be the first one. And the second one is base. That's internal. And does ServDC is a platform or is it just because I don't like similar forms. ServDC is a platform.
ServDC is the mayor's office for volunteerism and partnerships. So we're part of the mayor's office. QuickBase is entirely internal. So ServDC is generally, unless we're dealing with, donations that perhaps like the mayor's office itself is accepting. In general, your agency is the one who's having direct communication with donors. And so QuickBase, these are records that you're entering the details of and you are responsible for. If you want to accept this donation, this needs to be something that you guys are proactively like working with the donor to like understand and get those details. And what was your other question? I would say like it can be confusing at times. ServDC doesn't really work on gifts. We work on things that are for the purposes of your agency. So I think like the way I think of it tends to be is that a gift, which is never allowed, is something that is usually more personal in nature or can be viewed a different way. Whereas a donation is much more for like, this is helping an agency accomplish its authorized purpose.
So donations were classified as the stuff over $10 that you feel like your agency can use, or that the district could use. So those would be, donations that you go through ServDC. When it comes to gifts, we got two different types. We got gifts between employees, which is generally acceptable. The restriction there is from, a supervisor or a higher up employee to a subordinate. They have a restriction. You have a restriction between giving to your supervisor, not giving to, a higher up. But if there's employees on the same level, you can buy each other, presents all day. That's fine. Now, the restriction comes in when it's an outside source that's giving you the gift. Generally, I want to say just don't accept the gift, but if it's under $10 in value, it's okay, to accept it, one time or two. I think you get 2 times to accept it in a year. Like, so there's a vendor who works with your agency, and you're off and about having a working lunch and he offers to buy a sandwich. That's fine if it's under $10. If it's under $10, that's fine. Maybe another time throughout the year, it's fine. But after that, it's a $20 cap on that, and you don't accept it, anymore. And then just generally, out and about, someone coming in or giving gift cards or coupons or something like that or whatever, under a $10 limit, but 1 or 2 times a year. And then those are the little gifts. Go ahead.
Add on the place to start for gifts versus donations, at least for me, is food is exempt. So gifts are usually, like she said, personally accepted, whereas donations you're accepting on behalf of the agency. So that to me is the place to start.
One last thing I would plug is I know we're planning on doing much more regular donation trainings in this upcoming fiscal year. We'll be circulating this information widely, but feel free to reach out to us at donations@dc.gov. And we'll have a bit more detail and walking through like what this process looks like, what does quick